Hi children, it's good to see you again. I don't know if you're in school or if you're in home. I'm at home working from home again, here we all are again. But it's good to be together, and I thought it was probably time that we heard about the end of the story of Joseph. Do you remember Joseph had such an up and down life? One minute he was doing really well, he was the beloved son of his father and he had all those brothers and it seemed to be quite a nice family. But there were lots of problems, and there sometimes are problems in families, aren't there? And I think it was jealousy. His brothers were jealous of him because Joseph seemed like such an amazing person. He had all these dreams about how people were bowing down to him, and he felt like the most important person in the family, which really cheesed everybody off. And do you remember that he was grabbed one day in the fields when he was far from home and his dad did not know what was going on? And he was put down in the pit, and then the brothers sold him to those people who went to Egypt across the desert, and poor Joseph found himself in a foreign country that he wasn't used to, and he didn't know, and he didn't know anybody there, and he didn't speak the language. Imagine how difficult that would be. But then do you remember somebody called Potiphar, who was a very wealthy man, came and took Joseph into his household, and Joseph was so good at running things that soon Potiphar was able to relax while Joseph ran everything. But then Potiphar's wife was jealous of Joseph and she made trouble for him. And do you remember that he went from being happy in that household to being thrown into prison? Doesn't seem fair. And so then he was in prison. And then there were some dreams, weren't there? Some other people had dreams. Let's see if we can remember what happened. So, when the cupbearer and the baker had had these dreams and told Joseph about them, do you remember he told one of them that it was good news dream, it was a really good news dream for the cupbearer, but it was not a good news dream for the baker. And when Pharaoh had his birthday, if you remember, which happened quite soon after those dreams took place, he restored the cupbearer to serve him, but the poor old baker lost his head. Joseph had said to the cupbearer and the baker, "If you get out of the prison successfully and Pharaoh takes pity on you, can you please put in a good word for me? Because I'm in this prison even though I've done nothing wrong. I did nothing wrong at Potiphar's house, and before that I did nothing wrong in my family. Nothing really to deserve being shoved in a pit and sold into a different country." Sadly, the cupbearer did not remember this request, and another 2 years went by. Can you imagine poor Joseph? He'd got his hopes up and he thought, I think maybe if one of them puts in a good word for me, I'll be out of this prison. But another 2 years went by in which Joseph had to keep faith and think, yes, I won't give up hope. God is still with me and God's hand is still on my life. Then another dream happened, and this time it was Pharaoh who had the dream. Now, as you know, Pharaoh was like the king of the country, and everything he did you had to obey. And so when he'd had his dream, he wanted somebody to tell him exactly what it meant, and this was what happened in the dream. First of all, he dreamt that he saw 5 very fat cows down by the River Nile, and they were eating grass and they were eating grain and they were looking really healthy and pretty happy. But then 7 cows that were very ugly and thin, and the sort of thing that you see in your nightmares, came along and ate up the fat, healthy cows. A similar thing happened later in the dream. He saw 7 healthy looking bits of corn and then 7 scrawny bits of corn on which there was no real grain to eat, and the scrawny bits of corn ate up the fat bits of corn. When he woke up, he felt very troubled, and he said to his magicians and the people who told him what was what in the kingdom, he said, well, tell me what this means, because I feel really disturbed about this dream. What's going to happen? What does it mean? And they said, well, nobody can tell you what the dream meant. That's just too difficult. And the Pharaoh was cross. He said, well, I need to know. This is troubling me. Who can tell me? And then the cupbearer remembered Joseph. And he said to Pharaoh, I've just remembered. I was supposed to tell you about this guy in prison who has the Spirit of God, and he knows how to interpret dreams. So the Pharaoh said, well, get him out of prison and make him come before me. So Joseph, he quickly had to shave, and he had to put on some clean clothes and have a wash because he was in a bit of a state in that poor old prison. And he appeared before Pharaoh, and the Pharaoh told him his dream. And Joseph had a long think, and he prayed about it to God. So Joseph prayed, and then he took his courage in both hands, and he went to the Pharaoh and he said, this is what your dream means. We're going to have some years where there is a lot of abundant harvest. The corn will be good, we'll be collecting grain, we'll have more than enough in this land of Egypt, down by the Nile where it's all fertile and things grow beautifully. We're going to have 7 years where it's really, really good at harvest time. But then we're going to have 7 years in this country when the harvests fail, and there's going to be famine, which means that people won't have enough to eat. The fact that you had the dream and it was the cows and also the grain shows that this is certain to happen, and it's going to happen soon. So I suggest, Pharaoh, that you find somebody to organise the food in this country. For the years when there's plenty, we'll store away lots of excess food, grain for making bread in great big barns, and then when the hard times come and there's no harvest in the 7 years that follow, we'll be able to give food to the people in our country. So you need someone who can think ahead and who can do really, really good planning and be in charge of this whole project. I wonder, children, if you can guess what happened next. Who was going to be the best person to be in charge of this project? Somebody who was special and rose into their family as being the special person, even though they were annoying. The person who ran someone else's household. The person who helped things run smoothly in the prison. Of course, the Pharaoh said, well, you're the person, Joseph. I choose you. Get on with the job, and you will be the second most important person in this country after me. He put a ring on Joseph's finger. He called for fine linen to be put round Joseph in the form of new clothing, and he gave him a chariot which Joseph got into and he rode around. So really those days when he had this amazing coat were almost coming true, because as he rode around Egypt in his chariot, people would bow and say, thank God you're here in our country organising the food situation. And so Joseph found himself in a very good place in his life.